Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen five most important articles that are relevant for the prelims and mains examination. Today, we have very few articles which are important, but we will carry out a detailed and comprehensive analysis of all these topics so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking our initiatives, do support us with your likes, your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before I start, I have a very important announcement for those who are preparing for 2026 and beyond. These IAS aspirants have a golden opportunity to enroll for our online classroom program at just 17,999 along with up to 12 months of free extension. I'm told by an academy that this offer is ending today. So this could be the last chance probably to enroll for the program at these low prices. And this course will give you access to all the live and recorded lectures, the study material, and even the test series, mentorship, and doubt resolution sessions. Now, on the subscription page, you might see a different price, but to avail the discount and the offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. Those interested, please click on the link provided in the video description. And if you want the PDF of the session, please scan the QR code on your screen and join my Telegram channel. After the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF over here. So, with this, let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 6, the Hindu carries a very important editorial that analyzes a recent government scheme that was approved by the Union Cabinet, the Pradhan Mantri Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana. If you guys remember, just a couple of days ago, we spoke about this topic under the prelims section. We understood some of the key details of this government scheme that has been launched, which is like an umbrella scheme for India's agriculture sector. So today, the Hindu has brought out a detailed editorial on this topic that provides a critical assessment of this important government scheme. So this topic is not only relevant for prelims, especially the features of the scheme will be important for prelims, but the assessment of this government scheme will be very crucial for the mains exam under Indian economy. So let's break down this topic, go beyond the editorial as well, and understand everything about the Pradhan Mantri Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana. So this scheme, which has been approved by the Union Cabinet, it fulfills one of the promises that the government had made in this year's union budget. So under the scheme, the government is setting aside 24,000 crores that will be spent over the next 6 years in 100 districts which are considered to be agriculturally backward. That is the focus of this government scheme. It subsumes around 36 existing schemes, and the focus is on efficient, effective implementation of the program. From the national to state to local level, there would be very active involvement from all the levels of the government to ensure the success of this ambitious government program. Around 36 existing government schemes in agriculture, they're all being merged and subsumed under Pradhan Mantri Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana. For example, even the flagship schemes like PM Kisan, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana, which was providing direct cash benefit transfer to the farmers. Even Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana that provided for crop insurance. So all such schemes will eventually come under this one mega umbrella scheme, that is the Pradhan Mantri Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana. Now let's understand how this program is going to be implemented. What are the targets that the government seeks to achieve? And what is the long term objective? And then in the end, we can carry out a critical assessment. Now, as per the cabinet's approval, if you go through the Gazette notification as well, you will get to know what are the specific details of this initiative. The government is setting up national state level, and district level authorities to monitor the overall implementation of this ambitious program. At the district level, at the grassroots level, Dhandanya district committees will be set up. The district Dhandanya committees will be constituted at the grassroots level to formulate the grassroots plan and to customize the plan as per the local requirements. Now, this is what makes the scheme flexible. It doesn't provide for a one nation, one solution sort of a scheme, but rather it provides for the inclusion of flexibility at the grassroots level so that ground level problems in agriculture in 100 most backward districts, agriculturally backward districts, could be addressed through this initiative. This is based on the aspirational districts program of Niti Aayog, which, which was seen as very successful. See, the Niti Aayog, which conceptualized the aspirational districts program, had identified the 100 most backward districts in the country in terms of infrastructure and socio-economic development. And these 100 districts received special focus and attention. And it has helped in improving the developmental indicators in these 100 most backward districts. On similar lines, this new agricultural scheme, the umbrella scheme, will focus on 100 most agriculturally backward districts in the country. Because agricultural disparity is one of the big challenges in our agriculture sector. From state to state, from district to district, even within the same state, there are a lot of disparities that are present when it comes to agricultural productivity and the cropping intensity. So these are the challenges that the scheme is trying to address. There are few states which are seen to be falling behind in terms of their overall agricultural productivity. There are some states which perform very well at the national level when it comes to overall agricultural productivity, but there are few districts within those top performing states which are being left behind. So these specific districts would be chosen and they would be the special focus of this program. 24,000 crores would be spent over 6 years to help improve the key agricultural indicators in these 100 most agriculturally backward districts. The government has even laid down the criteria to select these 100 districts. If you look at the criteria, the government is going to select those districts which register the lowest agricultural productivity. This will be one of the criteria, along with low cropping intensity. Those districts where during the peak cropping season, be it the Kharif season or Rabi season, where the cropping levels are way below national average. The sown area would be much, much lower than the national average. So those districts with low cropping intensity, low productivity, and low credit disbursement, where the offtake of agricultural loans given out by banks and financial institutions, that is institutional credit, would be extremely low. So that's an indicator that the agricultural activity is almost stagnant or it is declining in those districts. Or it could also indicate that farmers are relying on non-institutional loans from money lenders. That's where they get trapped into these debt traps, which even ends up contributing to farmer suicides in the country. So this scheme will identify 100 most agriculturally backward districts based on these three criteria. And the goal is to provide for essential infrastructure, be it warehousing facilities and cold storage. This can help in post harvest loss management. This has been one of the biggest pain points of Indian agriculture. Since agricultural products, especially vegetables, fruits, etc., have a very low shelf life, if you have to minimize the post harvest losses and ensure that you protect farmers' income, you need good logistics on the back end of the supply chain. So for that, you need modern warehousing facilities, cold storage solutions, effective transportation at the last mile, and that will be a priority under this particular scheme. The scheme will also focus on the quality of the seeds that are supplied, the fertilizers which are provided, the health of the soil, even water management. to minimize water loss and water wastage, because several crops are highly water intensive, like paddy, for example. And because of the heavy government subsidies under, let's say, the MSP, there is a tendency amongst farmers to grow only certain types of food crops, where the MSP is set higher because of the guaranteed income which is provided. So this has led to a decrease in crop diversification, which is neither good for farmers nor good for the environment. Crop diversification is absolutely essential. When you grow different kinds of crops, you will not only ensure overall food security and nutritional requirements for the country, it will help in rejuvenating the soil. It will help in managing the environmental cycles as well. For example, though there is a high demand for oil and pulses, the sowing of oil seeds and various pulses is very low in the country, even today, where farmers prefer either cash crops, commercial crops, or those crops which have a guaranteed MSP and that in a way guarantees their livelihood. So this has led to focus on only few types of crops, which has affected crop diversification, which in turn affects our biodiversity as well. So this scheme will try to encourage crop diversification to push the farmers to cultivate different varieties of crops. Because right now we are importing most of our oil seeds, pulses, and certain other food grains. They can be domestically produced. We can meet our food security nutritional requirements on our own, which will help build self reliance as well. So, this would be the focus of this program, and the eventual goal would be to increase farmers' income, provide for better livelihood in the agrarian rural areas, and provide for overall development in the agrarian parts of the country. So, it's a very ambitious program that the government has conceptualized. But the editorial is carrying out an assessment presenting both the positives and the negatives of the scheme. The editorial does praise the initiative of the government. It recognizes the potential of such a focused program in bringing out concrete results. It is something which can bring about tangible results, and that too in the most agriculturally backward districts. So, this will help curb the regional divide and the regional disparities which are present. This could definitely come as a blessing for farmers who do not have enough state support. And if implemented effectively by the district level Dandanya committees, because they will play a critical role in the last mile implementation, it could be a boon for the farmers at the grassroots, as it takes care of the entire cycle of agriculture, right from sowing to post harvest management. But otherwise, there are shortcomings as well, which the editorial is bringing out. The editorial points out that it is not just enough to have one umbrella scheme for the entire agriculture sector. What the country really needs is increased public spending in agriculture. The article correctly points out that in the last 4 to 5 years, there is a disturbing trend when it comes to budgetary allocation for agriculture sector. The public spending on agriculture has been consistently declining as a percentage of our GDP. This was flagged by the parliamentary committee as well. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture has flagged this concern regarding declining government expenditure on agriculture as a percentage of our GDP. If you look at public spending on agriculture in 2021-22, the government of India had spent around 3.53% of India's overall GDP. In the next year, this declined to 3.14%. That is in 2022-23. This has further declined to 2.57%. The next year, it has again declined to around 2.54%. And in the ongoing fiscal, it has been brought down to just 2.51%. So year on year, you see a substantial reduction in the budgetary allocation as a percentage of GDP. And this is indeed a matter of concern. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture also has pointed out that as to why government is reducing the expenditure on agriculture as a percentage of GDP, which is a key indicator. So even if you have such umbrella schemes in place, if overall public spending is reducing in agriculture, then it may not give the desired results. It may not eventually help us achieve our goals and targets. And also, the editorial is raising another important question. Will this scheme include local agricultural cooperative societies in its implementation? Will agricultural universities be provided a space to play a role in the implementation of this program? Because the involvement of these local institutions would be very critical. Right now, the scheme would be primarily implemented by the government at the national, state, and district level. There is also private sector participation under the scheme. Private sector collaboration through public private partnerships will also be promoted, and that is a priority of the scheme. While it is good to bring the private sector because it can bring the much needed capital, especially for enabling the back end logistics. But the key question is, will the government involve agricultural cooperative societies, which play a crucial role in our agricultural sector? Will agricultural universities be included? That is the question the article is raising. And the editorial says if these shortcomings are addressed, if government can boost public spending as a percentage of GDP and bring in more local expertise, then such schemes would have better results and there would be a better outcome, which would be beneficial for the farmers. So, this is what we take away from this important article. So, based on this, let's see what kind of question can be asked. And as I have promised, in every session, I will provide you the answer writing approach for the first question at least and discuss a model answer. So let's read the question carefully. The Prime Minister Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana can help reduce agricultural disparity. That is the first statement of the question. But what Indian agriculture needs is more public spending, not just one umbrella scheme. Critically examine. So when you approach answer writing, I've always told you, please read the question carefully, understand what the question is asking. Don't jump into answer writing just by spotting the topic. Try to understand what the question is expecting from you, how the answer should be designed based on the expectation of the question, the demands of the question. And also break down the question to make it easier. In every question, there are subparts. There will be 2 to 3 subparts in the question. So in this question, the first statement itself is one sub question. So you can start your answer directly by addressing the first part of the question, the statement. You can explain the Pradhan Mantri Dhan Dhanya Krishi Yojana as an introduction. That sets the context as well. You can mention that this is a newly approved scheme, an umbrella scheme, and list out the features. And here you can use bullet point format. Maybe first 2 lines can be like a paragraph where you introduce the launch of this new scheme. Right? You can say it's been recently approved by the Union Cabinet. It's a very ambitious umbrella scheme that subsumes 36 other agricultural schemes. Then, in a bullet point format, in 4 to 5 bullet points, explain the key features, the financial allocation which has been made, the focus areas, the criterias, etc. How it is modeled on aspirational districts program. Mention those 4 or 5 pointers. So in one paragraph, right, with these detailed bullet pointers, your introduction is complete and you've addressed the first part of the question. Now in the body, come to the second part of the question. Address this particular statement. Statement says that what Indian agriculture needs right now is more public spending. Talk about the importance of higher public spending in agriculture. Why higher government spending is necessary. So substantiate this argument. Give data to show the declining trend in public spending. Point out the declining trend. Maybe like a quick small table can also be drawn to list out how the public spending is going down year by year in the last 4 to 5 fiscal years. You can mention that even Parliamentary Standing Committee on Agriculture has flagged this concern. So try to point out that public spending on agriculture should be kept higher. It should keep on increasing, not decreasing. And discuss how one umbrella scheme will not solve your problems. Though it might bring out the positives, it might have some positive outcomes. right? One umbrella scheme alone is not going to address the root of the problem. Talk about the need for greater crop diversification. Talk about the need for uh, engaging the local uh, institutions like cooperative societies, the agricultural universities. So mention all of that. So that provides a critical examination of the scheme itself. So you will be talking about the positives and the shortcomings and then conclude your answer. In the conclusion, of course, your opinion will not change. Your view will remain the same. You will maintain that logical flow of thought. But maybe you can try to present some innovative solutions from your end. How government can increase public spending, for example, or maybe how we can try to bring in more private capital to increase the finances available in agriculture sector, something on these lines, right? So try to make it as innovative as possible so that it's like a way forward. It's like a suggestion you are providing to increase public spending in agriculture, because that is the core issue which is being raised by this question. So this would make for a good structured answer. So let's see if you can make use of this discussion and write an answer, and please post your answers in the comment section. Now let's look at another important article. There's a column which has been published by the Hindu, written by one of the members of the Monetary Policy Committee of the RBI. And this esteemed author is also a member of the technical expert group which conducted the household consumption expenditure survey for the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. So this author, based on his expertise, is presenting the viewpoint of the government and the RBI with regard to the extent of inequality in India. The topic of inequality is in the news. It has been trending for the past few days because recently the World Bank has published a report on inequality using the Gini index, the Gini coefficient. The World Bank has measured inequality levels across the world and it has brought out this report. And India has ranked at the fourth position in terms of equality which is present in the society. Now, this performance of India, which has been recorded by this World Bank report, has raised a lot of eyebrows. There are many who are very ecstatic about this performance of India being recognized by the World Bank. And as it points out towards the declining levels of inequality in our society, and especially uh, the political parties, the ruling party in particular, has tried to run away with this narrative that look how our schemes have performed, look how India has performed under our rule, how India has become the fourth least unequal country in the world, even better than G20 countries, G7 countries. There are others who have raised eyebrows for a different reason altogether. Because generally we keep on hearing that India is one of the most unequal countries. We have always seen reports after reports, that in a country like India, 90% of the wealth is owned by 1%, the top 1%, whereas the rest of the 90%, 99% in the country are left with bare minimum resources. We've always heard that on these inequality rankings, India performs one of the worst, usually having the lowest ranking possible. So, how come there is a sudden overnight shift or overnight turnaround? So, there are many who are criticizing the report itself, raising questions about the methodology that the World Bank has followed while bringing out the Gini index. So, the writer here is countering this criticism. Those who are criticizing this report, questioning India's performance and ranking, whether India has really risen up as far as inequality is concerned, have we really reduced inequality in the society? Those who are asking these questions and criticizing the report and the government. So, against them, the writer is presenting a counter argument, which I think is very valid as well. On these divisive topics, it's very important to look at both sides of the argument. So, first, let's understand what is India's performance according to this World Bank report. What is this Gini coefficient? And then we will take a look at what the writer is trying to point out. I will take you slightly beyond the article as well and try to discuss why the writer has a valid point. But at the same time, the critics also have a valid point. So let's look at this in slight detail. So, according to the World Bank's inequality report, India is the fourth most equal country in the world, ranking even above G20, G7 countries. The report especially praises India's efforts between 2011-12 to 2023-24 in uplifting millions and millions of people from poverty, especially extreme poverty. According to the report, India has done phenomenally well in reducing extreme poverty levels to just 2.3%. And the report credits various welfare programs of the government for this success and this performance of India. It gives credit to poverty reduction programs, financial inclusion initiatives like the Jandan initiative, and other welfare programs, including variety of government subsidies which are provided. These socio-economic welfare programs, which have been effectively implemented over the last decade and more, has contributed, according to the World Bank, to this improved performance of India to be ranked as the fourth most equal country in the world, with a significant reduction in extreme poverty levels. Now, the point is, how true are these numbers? See, it all depends on your perspective, where you're looking at from what angle, from what perspective are you looking at from. That's why we need to understand the Gini index, what is India's performance, how is this index actually computed, what's the methodology used, what's the methodology used by the World Bank, and is there any other methodology available to measure inequality levels. That's when you will get a complete picture. You'll understand why there are such contrasting stories coming up. Now, according to the World Bank report, India's Gini index stands at 25.5. It has reduced from around 28 to 25, and India's score is much, much lower than that of China and United States as well. Now, some of you might be wondering, how come if India's rank is lower than countries like China or US, how come our overall performance is better? That's because Gini index is a reverse index. It is on a scale of 0 to 100, and lower the score, better the performance. Lower score indicates better performance on the Gini index. Let's say hypothetically a country gets a Gini index score of 0. Then it means that country has almost erased inequality and it is the most equal country in the world. And on the other hand, let's say Gini index of a country is 100, means that country is the most unequal country in the world, which has not been able to solve the inequality challenge. So lower the score, better your performance. So India has lowered its score. It's much lower than even that of China, US, and others. And that's why we are ranking much above than even G20, G7 countries as well. If you look at the top three, in the top three position, we have the Slovak Republic, Slovenia, Belarus. And then at fourth position, it is India. So looking at the top three countries, it again raises doubts. How can you trust this index when it doesn't include any of the developed nations? The countries at the top three, they all have questionable track records. Belarus or Slovenia or Slovak Republic, right? That itself raises a doubt and suspicion. Now, to understand what's happening here, you need to look at Gini index and how exactly it is measured and computed. See, there are three ways in which the Gini coefficient can be determined. So either you can use income, the income levels in a country as a parameter, the overall wealth which is owned by individuals as a parameter, or the consumption levels as a parameter. Now, when you hear about India's high level of inequality and India's extremely poor performance in addressing inequality from various reports such as the Inequality Lab, the World Inequality Lab, which is a global think tank which brings out the inequality index. According to their assessment, India is one of the most unequal countries in the world. When you look at headlines, the top 1% are owning 90% of the wealth, or they're earning 90% of the income. That rest 99%, they barely earn the rest 10% of the income. When you read such stark reports pointing out the alarming levels of inequality, these reports are usually based on the income criteria and the wealth criteria. When you purely take income, wealth into consideration and develop the Gini coefficient, right, you will see stark inequality in the country. It is a fact that top 1% in our country are able to generate 90% of the income, own 90% of the wealth, or even more than that. Whereas the majority, 99%, 90% and above, they barely have access to less than 10% of the income and wealth. So in that regard, if you take income and wealth as the criteria to measure inequality, India remains one of the most unequal countries. But the World Bank report that you're looking at, it uses consumption as the primary criteria. Now, what is the difference over here? That is what we need to understand. And the writer actually has a very good point to defend uh, this report and even the claims of the government that the government is responsible for improved performance of India. The writer points out that this assessment of World Bank is based on the data that was collected by the recent Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. I'm sure many of you would have gone through the findings of this survey as well. It was very much in the news. We have covered this topic as well multiple times. The Household Consumption Expenditure Survey. This survey, conducted by the government, measures the extent of consumption, the type of goods and services which are being consumed by the average population. Now, this consumption survey mainly focuses on the lower and middle levels of the society. The top elites, right, are not really drawn into this survey, and their responses are not really recorded in the household consumption expenditure survey. So data which is collected here is primarily from the bottom 90%. The top 5 or 10% are almost excluded from this survey entirely. So this survey is trying to capture whether people in the country are buying enough milk, eggs, fruits and vegetables. What is the primary source of protein? Are they able to access essential services like public transportation, water, electricity? What is being consumed at the household level is being measured primarily for the lower income households and middle income households. That is the data which is being primarily captured in the household consumption expenditure survey. Your ultra high net worth individuals, millionaires, billionaires, they are not accounted under this survey. They will not provide those responses, right? Because these basic necessities is a last concern for these high net worth individuals. They already have access to all the possible goods and services you can imagine. So naturally, when you take only consumption as a criteria, look at the levels of consumption amongst the lower sections, the middle sections of the society, right? You will see a lesser difference between them. Because today, India has performed really well from the grassroots level. We have uplifted millions of people out of poverty. You take any poverty marker, whether you take the Rangarajan committee recommendation or the Tendulkar committee poverty line recommendation, right? It is an established fact that India has lifted out millions and millions of people out of poverty. In the last decade plus, India has lifted 27 crore people out of extreme poverty, which means the purchasing power has slightly improved of the lower sections, the middle sections of our society. Meaning people are buying more milk, more eggs, more meat, more fruits and vegetables. You see a significant improvement. There is an improvement in accessing services. Now, for example, the survey indicates that in rural India, right, if you take the bottom 20% of our society, previously, around 2006, 2007, only 6% of them in rural India were owning private vehicles. Now, this has jumped exponentially to 40%. That is in rural India, amongst the bottom 20%, 40% of the population is now owning vehicles, which means their transportation, their mobility has improved. Now, poor people in the rural areas, let's say poor farmers, landless peasants, they don't have to migrate to faraway cities. They can use their vehicles to go to nearby towns to find work and even come back the same day. So this slight improvement in purchasing power at the grassroots level, at the lower levels of the society, the mid levels of the society, has led to higher consumption, right? Now, most of the people today can afford at least a basic mobile phone, a basic internet connection. So, this data is also captured. The fact that people are able to access basic essential services is getting captured under the household consumption expenditure survey. So, when you look at only the consumption data and design the Gini coefficient, obviously performance of India would be much, much better because India has done phenomenally well in the last 30 years. Since LPG reforms, we have uplifted millions out of poverty, even extreme poverty. Extreme poverty levels are really down in our country. That is a fact. That's why you see this improved performance. The top 1%, the top 10%, their consumption is entirely excluded. It's not even captured in this index. Now, if you bring that, then it's a different story altogether. Now, you look at our high net worth individuals, the millionaires, the celebrities, etc. If you account for the luxury items they acquire, be it luxury watches, cars, villas, foreign real estate, right? Luxury vacations, whatnot. If you bring that into account, then the stark divide becomes evident. Now that stark divide is not evident because in the household consumption expenditure survey, the consumption levels of the top 1%, 5%, 10% is not really captured at all. It's only capturing the consumption levels at the bottom 90%. Obviously, you will see better equality there as the purchasing power has improved. People have been pulled out of poverty in large numbers. Today, people are spending more on essential goods and services, not on luxury. Basic goods like milk, bread, eggs, meat, fruits, vegetables, etc. And that is where you see a significant jump in India's performance. So, in that regard, the report is not wrong. It's presenting only one side of the picture, one perspective. And that's what the writer is also saying. Acknowledge India's progress that we have done instead of just criticizing everything. Yes, it is a fact that on income levels and wealth indicators, we are still way behind. There is extreme divide when it comes to income and wealth levels in the country. That is absolutely true. The writer is not discounting that. But acknowledge the fact that India has performed well in uplifting people out of poverty, improving their purchasing power. And today, more people are at least able to access basic goods, basic services that are needed for one's survival and a decent standard of living. So that is where you're seeing India's jump in the performance. That's why in the top four, top five, it's countries like these which you don't expect to be ranked as the most equal countries. You don't find any developed nations from Europe or from North America, but you find these countries, right? That's because this index is just focused on consumption levels, which is only capturing consumption from the bottom 90% of the society, the lower middle sections of the society. So now I think the confusion gets cleared for you, right? Now, if you take income levels to measure the Gini coefficient, then it's a different story altogether. It's the opposite. The alarming headlines that you see often based on World Inequality Lab's report that in India, top 1% are owning 90% of the wealth, generating 90% of the income. That's where these reports become true. But here also, writer points out it's not that these indices are also perfect. Even when you use income or wealth as a criteria to measure inequality, a lot of mistakes are made here as well in the methodology. For example, the writer points out in the World Inequality Lab report, where India is always ranked at the bottom, they are actually over exaggerating the income of the top 1% and underreporting the income and wealth owned by the bottom 90%. They are accounting for pre tax income, not accounting for post tax income, because the top percentage will definitely end up paying a significantly higher volume of taxes. For example, top 1% today are generating almost, I think, 42% of the taxes which are paid or the income tax which is collected by the government. That is fair as well, obviously. The more you earn, the more you should pay to the government. That is what allows the government to spend on welfare, right? So the writer is pointing out, yes, income and wealth, if you look at these criterias, we are still extremely unequal. You do have these ultra millionaires, billionaires who are filthy rich, right? Whereas the bottom 95, 99% are left with nothing. So you will see that stark divide on income and wealth criteria. But on consumption criteria, India has definitely shown an improvement. And that is something which should be acknowledged as well. While you criticize the methodology and look at the stark income and wealth divide which is present, you have every right to raise your question about this. At the same time, acknowledge the performance India has registered in terms of improved consumption levels. Yes, it may not take into account the consumption of the top elites, but still improved consumption by the poor classes, by the extremely poor, by the lower and middle section of the society is still a marker of growth, a marker of progress. And the credit will go to the government welfare schemes, right? Over the last 3 decades, whatever welfare schemes the government has implemented, from Manrega to Ayushman Bharat, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana or Gramin Awas Yojana, various schemes have played a big role in uplifting our people, improving their purchasing power. So that is what we take away from this article. Let me know what is your view on this. Has India really reduced inequality? Are we really the fourth most equal country in the world? Or do you have a contrary opinion? Let me know in the comments. But please keep in mind there are different ways of looking at inequality. There is the consumption angle, which the World Bank report is looking at. There is the income and wealth angle as well. So, depending on where you're looking at this issue from, the overall performance of India will change. So, let me know what you think about this and take up this practice question. Now, moving on, we have a couple of important updates, and then we will look at the prelims article as well. The United States State Department has designated the TRF, the Resistance Front, as a foreign terrorist organization and specially designated global terrorist. Now, this designation by the US State Department is very, very crucial as it enables the global fight against terrorism. The TRF is the same terror outfit which was responsible for the Pahalgam terror attack a couple of months ago. The TRF initially claimed responsibility for the attack. India holds the TRF responsible for the Pahalgam attack as well. And the Resistance Front is essentially a Pakistan sponsored terrorist organization. And it is also a front, it's just a proxy, a shadow for Lashkar-e-Toiba, the primary anti-India terrorist group that Pakistan has sponsored and cultivated against India. So this terrorist group was founded in 2019 following the changes that India carried out to Article 370 and the status of Jammu and Kashmir. After India revoked the special status of J&K and reorganized Jammu and Kashmir into 2 union territories. In response to these changes, which was opposed by the separatist factions, the TRF was founded. TRF was established by Muhammad Abbas Sheikh, a well-known terrorist who was killed in a encounter by our security forces in 2019 itself. So this entity is not a brand new terrorist organization. Though it primarily comprises of Kashmiri separatists and local youth who have been radicalized and indoctrinated, there are foreign terrorists as well working for TRF from Pakistan. There is clear Pakistani state involvement where ISI is involved in providing state support, in supplying funds, weapons, and resources, and enabling their cross border infiltration. More importantly, it was just set up as a front, as a proxy for the Lashkar-e-Toiba. So the TRF has been responsible for some of the big attacks in the last 5 years. Initially, TRF was mainly targeting our security forces in Jammu and Kashmir, but later it started targeting civilians as well, especially Hindu minorities. Last year, you might remember, in the Riyasi district, Hindu pilgrims were targeted. Kashmiri Pandits have been targeted in the last few years by the TRF. So minorities have been targeted, and even migrant laborers from outside of J&K, especially workers from UP, Bihar, have been specifically singled out by this terror organization. Because ever since India did away with the provisions of Article 35A, right, which provided few special privileges for those who are domiciled in J&K, it allowed outsiders to settle, work, and enjoy equal rights. So the TRF has always been taking it out against the outsiders, the so-called outsiders, and it has been targeting migrant workers. It has targeted civilians as well, including the religious minorities and especially security forces. And another recent trend which we have noticed is that it has even started targeting infrastructure projects, which is quite rare. Recently, an attempt was made to carry out an attack near the Zimor Tunnel, which is a strategic project which India is building. So the TRF is now designated by the United States. The US government, the State Department, has held it accountable for the Pahalgam attack, and it is listed TRF as a foreign terrorist organization and specially designated global terrorist. Now, with this designation, the US will bring its set of sanctions against these terror outfits. US counterterrorism efforts will be stepped up against such organizations which are listed by the State Department. This will help Indian efforts, and it's also a representation of the close defense counterterrorism partnership between India and the United States. Right? India's push that has been given through course of diplomacy to point out these groups and flag their links with Pakistani state actors has been yielding results. So this is a success of our course of diplomacy as well. See, India had already designated this group as a terrorist organization in 2023 under the UAPA, the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, which is the primary anti-terror law of India. Now, the US also has designated this outfit as a terror organization, and this enables our joint counterterrorism efforts. Is that clear? Now, there is another important point you need to note down here. Now, why did Pakistan help in the establishment of a group which has a very different sounding name, a more English, global sounding name, the Resistance Front? You don't usually find that. If you look at the history of Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism, most of the terror groups clearly have a radical jihadist connection. The name itself tells you the connection, like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, Al-Badr. These clearly have a religious fundamentalist connotation. So why did Pakistan enable the establishment of a group called TRF, which sounds like an English name, which sounds more global, which shows no connection either with Pakistan or Kashmir or radical fundamentalist religion, right? So this is where you need to understand that this is part of Pakistan's deliberate strategy. Because by 2018, 2019, Pakistan was under tremendous global pressure to not sponsor groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed to carry out attacks on Indian civilians, Indian cities. Also, this was a time when Pakistan was on the grey list of FATF. It was staring at the possibility of global economic sanctions if it were to be blacklisted. So, to avoid that blame, to avoid that responsibility, Pakistan founded two new proxy groups. One was TRF to act as a proxy for Lashkar-e-Toiba. It even set up a proxy for Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is known as the PAFF, People's Anti-Fascist Force. Now, you tell me in the comments, when you hear the name, the Resistance Front or People's Anti-Fascist Force, do you automatically associate this with Pakistan-sponsored terrorism or radical religion, misinterpreted religion-based terrorism or anything related to Kashmir? No, you don't associate with that because clearly the names are in English. A deliberate attempt has been made to give it like a global angle, right? To avoid the blame on Pakistan, to evade any possible international sanctions and the blame. That is the strategy Pakistan has been following by setting up these front organizations, these shadowy proxy outfits for Lashkar-e-Toiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. So this is something we learn from this important development. Next, there's another key development. The European Union has slapped sanctions on a major Indian oil refinery. Now, this is a very concerning development. In the context of the Russia-Ukraine war, as you know, Western countries have hit Russia with economic sanctions over the last 3 years. Right? In fact, American sanctions on Russia goes back to 2014, ever since Russia annexed Crimea. So ever since Russia invaded Ukraine from 2022 onwards, Western powers have targeted Russia with economic sanctions, trying to cripple its economy. But India has rejected these sanctions. We have bypassed sanctions, saying we don't follow unilateral sanctions. India has even emerged as one of the biggest buyers of Russian oil. We have even overtaken China, become the biggest buyer of Russian oil. So in a way, India has been funding the Russian war efforts in Ukraine. India has even profited from this as we are refining Russian oil into various petrochemical products because we have a very strong, vibrant refinery infrastructure today, right? Plenty of large refinery industries are present in our country. And we are turning the raw material into various refined petrochemical products and exporting them, ironically, back into the European market. That's why the Europeans are quite pissed with India, that India is profiting from the war, selling the same Russian oil and gas, turning them into refined products, selling it back at a higher price, and Europeans are now buying it. So, this is where European powers, Western powers have been critical of India's stand. They have been trying to target India as well. And now they have brought sanctions on a major oil refinery in India. I'm sure all of you would have heard about Nayara Energy Limited, correct? It owns around 6,300 plus petrol bunks or petrol pumps across the country. It is one of the top oil refiners in our country, and its refinery plant at Vadinar in Gujarat. It is this facility of Nayara Energy which has been targeted by EU sanctions. And please note, this is currently India's second largest oil refinery. These European sanctions will hit at the very heart of India's energy infrastructure. The Vadinar refinery, owned by Nayara Energy, is the second largest petrochemical refinery in our country. Now, the reason why they're targeting India and Indian companies is because in this organization, the Nayara Energy Limited, it is the Russian energy giant Rosneft which owns 49% of the stake. So 49% of the shareholding is with a Russian petrochemical company. And Nayara has been purchasing Russian oil at cheaper cost, refining the products, turning them into petrochemical products and exporting them around the world, especially back into European market. Is that clear? So that is the reason why the EU is trying to target these refiners and any other entity which is enabling in the sell and the refining and the distribution of Russian oil. They are even targeting the shadow fleets, the various ships and vessels which are being used to carry Russian sanctioned oil or sanctioned goods. So, what does this mean for India and the company? See, these sanctions could have a significant impact because the sanctions will lead to crippling of bank transactions for the organization. Now, a oil major like Nayara will have global transactions, not just into the Russian market, but maybe into Africa, into European market, into the North American, South American market. These bank transactions based on Western banking financial system, this could be entirely crippled. Its foreign assets, which are under the jurisdiction of Western governments, might be frozen. The top executives, they might face a travel ban. Even their personal assets can be frozen, which means there will be direct consequences. The ability of the company to lift Russian oil, refine it, and then export it to other countries will be severely affected. And this will take a hit on India's second largest refinery. That's why India has called out the hypocrisy of these European countries. Recently, I was watching this interview by our Minister for Petroleum, Hardeep Singh Puri, very clearly explained that India has always abided by the rules. We respect international law. If the sanctions were from the UN, India would have no hesitation in following them. But we do not follow unilateral sanctions. We are not allies of US or European Union, right? So we can't simply align with them and target Russia. We don't follow unilateral sanctions. And more importantly, India has struck a good deal with Russia. And if it is good for our import bill, for our energy security, why wouldn't India proceed with the arrangement? Right? India will look after its own national interests. As Foreign Minister Jaishankar has pointed out, the Europeans, they take this moral high ground. They expect the world to care about their problems. Right? They think European problems are problems of the entire world, but they don't care about the problems of the others. Now, you tell me how many European countries genuinely stood with India during Operation Sindoor, explicitly gave support to India, right? You can count which countries gave such support. Now, the point is, India has always maintained that autonomy, more or less, when it comes to our foreign policy. We maintain that strategic autonomy, look after our interests. If there are cheaper, reliable sources of oil available, we will buy that no matter what. We will not follow unilateral sanctions. And more importantly, India has followed the price cap that these countries had set. When the war began in Ukraine and they imposed the sanctions and cut off Russia's oil gas exports, it could have crippled the global oil markets. There would have been a sudden drop in oil gas supplies, leading to a crisis in the oil market, and it would have led to a massive spike in oil and gas prices. So, to avoid that, Western countries kept a price cap of $60 per barrel and allowed countries like India, they encouraged countries like India to buy Russian oil and gas so that there is enough supply in the market to stabilize the prices. India has always stuck to the price cap. We have been buying Russian oil within this price cap which has been set. Now, European Union is further reducing the price cap to around $47 per barrel, which will make it almost impossible for Russia to sell the oil to India because it would be at a loss. So India had enabled the global oil markets to be stable. The prices were maintained at a stable rate despite the sanctions because we were lifting Russian oil in large quantities within the price cap that had been set. So even then we had shown a sense of balance, a sense of responsibility. So European countries accusing India for laundering Russian oil is pure hypocrisy at its peak. That's why India has rejected these sanctions and India will be taking countermeasures to protect its energy security. Because these sanctions will definitely hurt the second largest refiner and it will have an impact on India's energy security. So India has rejected these sanctions and we have said we will be taking our countermeasures. Now, coming to the last topic for today, the prelim section. The Indian Navy has commissioned INS Nistar. I had mentioned this topic briefly a few days ago. Now, let's understand why INS Vistar and its commissioning into the Indian Navy is so critical. The Indian Navy has blue water ambitions to have the ability to deploy its assets across the world, across faraway oceans. And especially when you're looking at maritime dominance, what you really need is submarine capabilities. If you have to dominate the maritime space, right, you need assets like aircraft carriers, large naval fleets, carrier battle groups. And amongst these, all these warships, submarines play an absolute critical role. They not only give you enhanced stealth, but they give you the ability to lie low, monitor the enemy, and also potentially provide us with the triad status, the nuclear triad status, if it's a nuclear powered submarine carrying nuclear weapons on board. So, a submarine fleet is absolutely critical for any blue water navy or any navy aspiring to be a blue water navy. Now, the challenge with submarines is that there is a heightened risk of accidents, deep water accidents. What if the submarine gets stuck? What if it faces technical issues or sudden depressurization or a fatal collision or accident? There have been such incidents, even onboard fire, and the lives of the naval officers on board would be at risk. And there is no way to rescue them unless and until you bring in specialized technology and specialized assets. Since submarines dive deep under, right, even up to 100 meters and below, it's almost impossible to mount any rescue operation if you do not have specialized equipment and assets. So, Indian Navy is now inducting our first indigenous diving support vessel, INS Nistar. Under the Nistar class, we will be inducting these indigenously designed and built vessels, which provide specialist support in carrying out these deep rescue operations, deep underwater. So, INS Nistar is the first one in this class. There would be a follow up ship as well, and it carries special equipment on board. It is equipped with special sonars to detect our own submarine because if there is an accident, you may not be able to find its location easily. It has specialized sonar equipment, radars on board to detect the submarine where the location is. And it can deploy these remote submersible vessels. There are remotely controlled submersible drones, right, which can dive deep underwater and try to provide support for the submarine which is facing a crisis. Or a manned crew can also be sent to rescue the submariners who are trapped. These submersibles can bring back around 14, 15 people at a time, and they can dock with the submarine. They can latch onto the hull without allowing the pressurized gas to leak out. Because the moment you open a hatch under such high levels of pressure, essentially you will see a catastrophic disaster, right? So this vessel carries specialized equipment, specialized hypobaric chambers under which the submariners can be rescued and safely brought back. And it contains specialized firefighting equipment as well for underwater rescue missions. It will enable these deep sea missions and deep sea rescue operations. We could use this to help other friendly partners as well. So this establishes India's maritime dominance, and it enables our submarines to venture far out, knowing that if at all something goes wrong, a successful rescue mission can be mounted because of vessels like INS Nistar. So it's a self-contained vessel which can help in such deep sea rescue missions, even up to 100 meters and below underwater. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope you guys have understood everything. And if you like the session, please let me know in the comments, press the like button, and we'll see you tomorrow in the next class. Thank you. Have a good day.